Hello, everyone. We welcome you to our Sunday morning roundtable discussion. This morning is Sunday, December 29th, 2019. We are recording from the Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent, Plainfield, New Jersey, in the United States of America. And thank you all for joining us this morning. And Florence will begin with our prayer.
From page 187 of Miscellany. May the divine light of Christian Science that lighteth every enlightened thought illumine your faith and understanding, exclude all darkness or doubt, and signal the perfect path wherein to walk, the perfect principle whereby to demonstrate the perfect man and the perfect law of God. In the words of St. Paul, now the end of the commandment is charity, out of a pure heart and of good conscience and of faith unfeigned. And St. John says, for this is the message that ye heard from the beginning, that we should love one another. May the grace and love of God be and abide with you all. Mary Baker Eddy.
Beautiful, thank you. Okay, watching point.
Watch number 102. Watch that you turn every untoward circumstance and experience to your spiritual advantage. Mrs. Eddy instructed her students to declare when they were attacked by error, quote, I am the better for this experience. It's doing me good, lifting me higher, and strengthening my understanding. Once, when she experienced something on her drive that shocked her, she said, quote, know that a shock only makes us go higher. Now let us know when mortal mind shocks us, we can use it to go up higher, and so it cannot catch us there, end quote.
Thank you. So comments?
It makes me think demanding the blessing. That's something I had never heard before coming here, but seeing it in action the past 6.5 years, you really can make sure that each situation gives you a blessing.
Thank you. Florence?
Well, something shakes when we are shocked, and I like the thought that it shakes us only upward. We can use it all the time. That's why it says that whatever error we see, we must use it too to go higher, because it blesses us in our, walk onward and upward with the divine, like that.
Yes, thank you.
And I remember being told years ago many times that to know that this experience can only do me good. And then I realized also that you go into that experience then with dominion, not as a victim, but as with dominion. And then it can't roll over you.
Thank you.
I used it a lot this week.
Good. Because when something happens, you get a shock, or goodness, your husband wants a divorce. your friend had this dire doctor's report. The human mind, your first reaction, oh no, oh God, it's just terrible. Oh. And so then you sink along with it. But this teaches you how to reverse. This is being, what is that about meeting your adversary? Be quick with.
Agree with thine adversary.
Thank you very much.
Agree with it quickly.
Yes, this is twisting it around so that you're not getting into this negative response, You're knowing immediately this will only bless me. This will only do me good. And that keeps you with a high expectancy. It keeps you on the right path. It keeps you with God.
And that only good is going on.
Thank you. Yes, only good is going on. That was something Mrs. Evans often told us, no matter what the picture was, only good. Because remember what the Bible says, all things, what?
Work together for good to them that love God.
To them that are called according to his purpose. Therefore, no matter what it says, God will turn it to gold. He'll make it whatever. If you get a divorce, you'll be better for it. If you have some kind of a physical problem, you will be better for it. You will come out, as Carol said, the victor, not the victim. So it's so important. You're always declaring the truth and reversing what error would try to say or do to you. That's why, even in a simple thing like if you cough, what do you say?
God good.
God good.
Mm-hmm. God good. And why do you say that?
Well, because God is good, and really, what the cough is what is wrong turned around. I mean, good turned around. So you emphasize the good that's here. God good.
Yes. Yes.
The cough is a belief that God is not good, or that there is some power other than God that is not good. And you're declaring what is true.
And you're, to the human world, the human sense, you're sending out some kind of a negative impulse. Oh, she's coughing. She's got cold, this, that. I better stay away. Now you reverse all that. God is good. Only good is going on. Only good is contagious. It's very important. And that is being so instant in truth that error is
always too late.
Always too late. Mm-hmm. And we don't procrastinate. You don't let all this stuff pile up on you and then one morning feel like you want to take a gun to your head.
You don't have a conversation with the serpent.
Nope, you don't talk to it. You reverse it. Because always, in any negative experience, always the reverse is true. Always God is present. And you will be the victor and not the victim. So never forget, this is just a very simple rule to keep with you at all times. It's part of your ammunition. Any other comments?
Yeah, it reminds me of that quote from the Bible where Paul says he glories in infirmities.
Yes.
He's saying, praising God in the middle of whatever he's going through, and where he says he can't be separated from the love of God. He's acknowledging the spiritual good that's there, no matter how bad the situation may appear.
And was he ever a living example of that, wasn't he?
Yes.
Praising God in the Roman prison. Thank you, Michael. So good. Well, we'll keep this with us and know it to be the truth. And we will thank Ray. Ray, I guess she's been giving us the watching points for 2 years now. And we're changing over to Karen now, passing of the
torch.
The torch, yeah. So we thank Ray very much.
Ray gave us one more to start the year. And then
Good, one more to start the year. Well, thank you very much, Ray, for your faithful service. And thank you, Karen, for volunteering to carry it on. These watching points are so important. Dear Mr. Carpenter, 500 of them, they just flowed out of him. And you see these Eastern translations we're having, right? The Middle East.
Whole bunch of languages.
And they're getting so much from them. And you read Napoleon's beautiful Christmas card to us on Wednesday. These truths are getting passed around now. They're being resurrected. Thank God for that. And they will help spiritualize the world.
They're hungry for more.
and they're hungry for more. Wonderful work. Our subject this week is Christian Science. Golden text. Jeffrey?
He sent his word and healed them and delivered them from their destructions.
Thank you. Now, Joanne wrote on our forum, and the forum is something you can find on our website. The word deliver, to free, to release as from restraint, to set at liberty as to deliver one from captivity, to rescue or to save. So think of what God does for us. And it's interesting, it's phrased, deliver them from their destructions. What does that mean?
God didn't make it happen. They were making it happen.
Thank you. Yes. We've made our own destructions.
Their beliefs.
Their belief.
Error comes to us for life, and we give it the life it doesn't have.
That's it. Yes. Yeah, and that it's in Ecclesiastes. I don't know if I can quote it exactly, but something about the same idea that God made us perfect, but we have sought out what?
Many inventions.
Many inventions.
Many inventions.
Yep, many inventions.
Mrs. Eddy refers to all of this stuff as the Adam dream, doesn't she?
Yes.
These are all these destructions, these inventions. It's all the result of believing that there is life or truth or intelligence in matter.
And it is a rabbit's hole. Once you start, there's no end to all the inventions human mind makes. So, Shardy, would you read in the Bible, Isaiah, the first 4 verses? Yes. Isaiah 42.
Behold, the first to the fourth.
Right.
Behold, my servant, whom I uphold, mine elect, in whom my soul delighteth. I have put my spirit upon him. He shall bring forth judgment to the Gentiles. He shall not cry, nor lift up, nor cause his voice to be heard in the street. A bruised reed shall he not break, and the smoking flax shall he not quench. He shall bring forth judgment unto truth. He shall not fail, nor be discouraged, till he have set judgment in the earth, and the isles shall wait for his law.
Thank you. Now, whom are they speaking of?
Christ.
The Christ.
This is one of the many prophecies of Jesus' arrival.
And it is the impersonal Christ. Because I do remember years ago in Mrs. Evans' class discussing this. And it was very helpful because, we all are expressions of the Christ if we allow ourselves to be. And he shall not fail nor be discouraged. Individually and collectively. I think about that with our church. Our church, its mission cannot fail. And we must never be discouraged by anything. Because it comes in to get you discouraged. Or to think you're failing individually, maybe in your work, or collectively. What can a little church do? So remember, this is a prophecy for the Christ throughout all ages. And if we are living that Christ to the best of our ability, it applies to us too. We are his followers.
And this is this does not take away anything from it being a prophecy of Jesus' arrival, because Jesus' whole point of arriving was to show us the Christ and to be an example for us. So we can thank God for sending Jesus, for being the way shower, for being the example of the Christ. And all of this prophecy and all of Jesus' teachings and stuff are all consistent, and they're all for us, each one of us.
I have learned that since coming here that the Christ sent the disciples first to the Israelites, but also the Gentiles were then included. And I think it's a beautiful thing, because we're considered, and the Gentiles then were considered to be pagans, a lot of them, and non-believers. And they are saved also.
All included, all inclusive. So wonderful. Florence?
Yeah, I like the immense tenderness of the Christ, which is expressed in that verse 3. A bruised reed shall he not break, and the smoking flax shall he not quench. He shall bring forth judgment unto truth. Matthew Henry's commentary there, he says something very beautiful. He is tender of those oppressed with doubts and fears, and as a bruised reed, those who are as smoking flax, as the wick of a lamp newly lighted, which is ready to go out. He will not despise them, nor lay upon them more work or more suffering than they can bear. So that's just...
Thank you so much. Thank you for including that. I did want to talk about what that meant, and that tells us exactly what it means. Thank you, Florence. And so, Jeremy, I wanted to get into with this, that we will not fail or be discouraged, because I believe it goes with your citation 6 in Science and Health, that one must abide in the morale of truth, or he cannot demonstrate the divine principle.
I encountered this in lessons a few times and kept thinking I needed to look up morale, and so finally I did. And it was quite interesting what the difference is between what I thought it was. I thought it just meant whether you felt good or bad. But knowing that it's...
Yeah, read what you wrote.
Oh, okay. Well, on Wikipedia, it says morale, also known as esprit de corps, is the capacity of a group's members to maintain belief in an institution or goal, particularly in the face of opposition or hardship. Morale is often referenced by authority figures as a generic value judgment of the willpower, obedience, and self-discipline of a group tasked with performing duties assigned by a superior. According to Alexander Leighton, morale is the capacity of a group of people to pull together persistently and consistently in pursuit of a common purpose. Morale is important in the military because it improves unit cohesion. Without good morale, a force will be likely to give up or surrender. Morale is usually assessed at a collective rather than an individual level. In wartime, civilian morale is also important. Esprit de corps is considered to be an important part of a fighting unit.
Thank you. Now, this is why we do what we do week after week, to keep our morale going, to keep our encouragement, to encourage each other in this work. And through those law years, I mean, Mrs. Evans, I think back on all that we did all the time. That was why, to keep the morale up. And we were always having work parties or New Year's Eve parties or whatever we were.
Those are the years of the law case where we were sued.
Yes. And if that had not been done, we could have failed. We could have gotten discouraged. She was also keeping up her own morale, which because it was all aimed on her head. So you see, it's very important. And each one is important. The morale of the whole group is important, but what is that expression? A chain is only as good as what?
The
Weakest link.
Yes, link. So if you think you can be in your house having your own little pity party, and it's not affecting the whole morale of the group, think again. Do you want to be that weak link? We all need to not need to forget, neglect our duty to God, our leader, and to mankind. That alertness to duty, a daily duty to work with every day, has gotten me out of more pity parties and gotten me out of the sick bed more times than I can number. Because remember, you're not alone in your own little house, hoo-hoo-hooing. You are being a weak link to the greater cause.
And it's interesting how your purpose, what you think your purpose is, determines whether you can maintain that morale or not. Here we have a holy purpose. We have divine purpose. We have the greatest scientific discovery of all time, to live and to share with mankind. I mean, what greater purpose could there possibly be? And it starts out in Isaiah, "Behold my servant, whom I uphold." God upholds us. God maintains our morale. We don't have to willfully try. If we didn't have this to work for, it would be harder for us to maintain our morale. If we had some other selfish purpose or less important purpose, it would be harder for us to maintain our morale.
Definitely. I think if it was just for me or not for everyone, then I wouldn't be as interested and willing to work like I do. So
yeah, and the institution wouldn't survive eventually.
I think that's why, with even testimonies, as soon as you think that, no, I'm doing this to help someone, it gives a different feeling to go forward and, praying, give what someone will be blessed with. I really feel that.
That's exactly right.
Absolutely. That's the thing. If you're just doing it selfishly, you will fail and you will be discouraged. I can guarantee that. Been there, done that.
And if you don't, you will be rebuked by the morale that exists, in others, and you'll feel uncomfortable.
It'll become a silent rebuke. Who is speaking?
I read something going back to the armed services that, for example, in World War I, there were some individuals in the army that wouldn't shoot anybody of the enemy to save their own life. And what they figured out somewhere along the way was in training, they would change it to that you had to keep shooting to protect your fellow army people. And so that changed it for these people who refused to shoot anybody. So that's just what goes along with what you're saying here, is that when we stop thinking of just ourselves and then think of the whole collective, it really changes the whole picture.
It does. Thank you. So, thank you, Jeremy. That was, I'd never heard that either. I guess you hear about the morale of an army or a general morale, but how important this morale is. It's important for our nations and the world to keep our morale, to keep the positive picture in thought, the correct model, as Parthens has written to on the forum. Not to be downgrading and downpulling. If you want to lose what you have, yeah, keep an opposite model, keep a negative model, and you think about how bad it all is.
Just keep watching the news.
Keep watching the news. Yeah, that's what they want. There's a mesmeric claim going on there to get you depressed and give up, fail, and be discouraged. Our nation has a very mighty purpose. It has been called the New Jerusalem. It was founded on Christian principles. They must be kept and abided by, and we must keep our morale. But it starts in your own home, the morale in your own home, in our church, in community, nation, world.
And what is the greatest threat to our nation? Is it an attack from outside? No.
It's our own moving away from what we should be knowing.
Exactly. The greatest threat to our nation would be the elimination of the Christian principles that were the basis of the nation in the first place. The greatest threat to the Christian Science movement is the infiltration of the human mind that refuses to obey God.
I think along those lines, it's so important that we recognize that elected officials, at least on the federal level, swear their allegiance to the Constitution, not to an individual. And I think that's different than, from what I understand, different than any other country in the world.
Thank you.
Yes, and judges are sworn in on the Bible. Except for one.
So, yes, and we must maintain that standard because they're chipping away that we lose it. And they're saying, oh, we must be loving. This is love. It's not love, it's stupidity. They will use what they think are Christian principles to turn it around and turn against us. But if we don't know what the Christian principles are, we won't be able to defend and love them. That's why we have to know what they are, so we won't be confused by this false, fake sense of love, this do-goody human sense of love. And I do attribute the fact that the Christian Science movement suppressed the books, the Carpenter books in particular, but all of the books that explain the difference between being a human do-goody and living your life according to law and principle. Compassion, yes, great compassion, but not human do-goody. Yes, because without the wisdom, good intentions without wisdom equals evil. And we as scientists must maintain this standard because most people don't understand this. And it's most important that we do in order for all nations everywhere to have freedom from certainly the bondage of tyranny, tyranny in government, but also the tyranny, ultimately the tyranny of the human mind. So we keep at it. They think they're chipping away. Well, we are chipping away even more so. Even more so. That's why 24/7 we are in this. You can't put your sword down. You can't say, I'm going to take a day off. You can have a pleasant, happy day doing various things, but the sword must always be in your hand. Tool in one hand, the tool of work, the sword in the other. So I would like Carol to read number 4 in Science and Health.
The procuring cause and foundation of all sickness is fear, ignorance, or sin. Disease is always induced by a false sense, mentally entertained, not destroyed. Disease is an image of thought externalized. The mental state is called a material state. Whatever is cherished in mortal mind as the physical condition is imaged forth on the body.
This is a hugely important statement. Now, many people will say, well, I got something, and I had never imaged it forth. I had been thinking about it, such and such disease. Well, let's go into that a little bit. The word cherish, the definition: to hold as dear, embrace with affection, treated with tenderness, warmed, comforted, fostered, to trust in a manner to encourage growth, to indulge. Okay, so maybe you weren't thinking some so-called disease, but were you going over and over in your mind how you hate your ex-husband, or the injustice that you endured as a child, or the accident that happened that seems to have lamed you for life? Do you go over that in your mind every once in a while, or a lot? You are encouraging an error to grow. You are indulging in an error. And if you don't catch it mentally, guess what?
Get it.
You'll get it some other way. Only for what purpose?
To change you, to bring you to God.
Yes, to wake you up and to say, stop it. Stop it now. Stop doing this. Catch it early on. We started off talking about how you catch it early on. But if you don't catch it early on, well, again, whatever it says, this can only bless me. This can only do me good. This will wake me up so that I am not indulging and causing to grow these thoughts. You are more or less inviting the belief of animal magnetism in your home and having a tea party with it when you indulge in this thought.
I think also if you've done something wrong or made a mistake at some point and go on, unforgiven, not forgiving yourself, for years.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
In essence, you're cherishing it.
You are. You are.
You are insisting that you are something other than the child of God.
So ask yourself, where is your thinking? What have you been cherishing? And do you want this manifested in some way, externalized in your experience even further than it already has been? And then get back to the truth of it. I go back to the eternal truth destroys what mortals seem to have learned from error, and man's real existence as a child of God comes to light. You have to do this. There's no getting around it. It's a requirement, and it's a requirement of love that love makes on us. Because who wants to truly be this way or to go back and rehash? Now, Joe found something really beautiful in the association address by Blanche Percy Hoke. If I had read it, I certainly hadn't remembered it. The memories of wrongs, evils, failures must yield its ghost to the angels of truth, which show that error never really happened, nor made history. A student was talking with Mrs. Eddy, telling our leader how her husband was suffering from injuries received in the Civil War. Mrs. Eddy quickly asked, What war? The lady explained, why, the Civil War. Mrs. Eddy again asked, what war? Again, the explanation, why, the Civil War between the North and South. Still the same question. What war? But she added, I see you both believe there was a war. And with that, the light broke through. Now that is talking in the absolute. I often wondered why Mrs. Eddy was around during the Civil War. Very little is it ever mentioned. We know, of course, that she was very anti-slavery, and she wrote, when she lived in Charleston, anti-slavery articles. And we also know that she loved the South. That's about all I know.
And we've also heard that when she lived down there, she went to a black church, not a white church.
Yeah, right, because she found the enthusiasm and the joy and the love there. They used to take her in a carriage because she loved going there. But that's, yeah, and I also heard once that they used to knit and make things for the soldiers. But very little is said. And that's because she knew in her heart, what war. Now think, if we could say that, what healing there would be. Because people go on and on and on about the effects of this war. Not just this war, World War II, any war. All the suffering, the Holocaust, the slavery, this and that. Do we want to keep generating all this ill will? What war?
It reminded me of Bicknell Young in Association Addresses says that we need to burn the bridges to these things so we don't even have the memory of the error.
Yes. And that is true. You know, the watching point too, when you get a healing, you work another day to know what is the last thing you do.
That it never happened.
Thank you, Lil, that it never even happened. Because if you think it happened, then you're going to go over it and over it and over it and worry that it's going to happen again. I'm so grateful, Joe. Thank you. And it's so timely for the new year where we're all going over what happened last year. Well, not all of us, some of us.
Yeah, we can ask ourselves, she said, what war? We can ask ourselves, what war in our family? What war in our business? What
in our
war
body.
In our
bodies?
I really like. Sorry.
Are we admitting warfare? The only legitimate warfare that Mrs. Eddy ever talks about is the warfare between good and evil. And good is always triumphant because it's the only thing that's real. She does tell us that we have enlisted in a warfare. But let's be clear about what the warfare is.
She talks about that all the time, and it's always the warfare with the human mind. And any of these so-called wars that we've had, whether it was a Civil War, World War I, World War II, Korean War, any of the wars, it's been that. It's been when it goes on and on unhandled, and then it blows up in some way. We also know, too, the people that make a lot of money on wars have instigated wars, which is a very, very evil, devilish thing to do, and they will get their just reward for that. So remember, what war? I love it. I don't ever remember reading it. And thank you, Joe, again. That was just, it explains, and you see the point from which our leader spoke and operated from. And if we all knew that, and all of us, hey, one with God is a majority. It doesn't take thousands. This group here can wipe out the effects of these wars. And we need to, we must, so we don't give it life. But it must be done with deep understanding, not superficially. Like, oh, there's no war, there's no animal magnetism, there's nothing to be afraid of.
Prove it.
Prove it.
Well, someone once explained to me that, one of the Bible accounts of Jesus when he's after he's resurrected, one of the disciples is talking to him about everything that happened and how he was crucified, and he actually said, "What happened?" Like he wasn't aware of it anymore, and sort of going along with what you're saying, how he had already risen above whatever horrible thing he had experienced, and he was no longer conscious of it.
Thank you. That's so true. Yes.
And he went through that experience in order to prove to all mankind the unreality of death, the unreality of life, truth, intelligence, or substance in matter.
And Mrs. Dia says it said the same article, age, at the end. You know, people say I was born over there in the hills of Bo, but I was not. I was.
I think that I'm not trying to change that from what happened, but Mrs. Eddy, when she returned to the north, was very bedridden for a lot of the time. But from the tidbits I've picked up from many different sources and nothing really concrete, a lot of what she started to do then was to write in the north about anti-slavery stuff. So she was very, very supportive even at that time. And I almost believe that when she had that Newton's apple thing, when she fell on the ice, it wasn't necessarily a slavery issue that she went to the meeting about, but she was very active in the reform movement.
And yes, and what is our ancestry, to finish what I was saying? The beautiful, the good, and the pure. And that is the only ancestry I care to have. The beautiful, the good, and the pure is our ancestry. And someone's making a lot of. So this idea of knowing the past, the Hebrew boys came out of that fiery furnace with what?
Smell of smoke.
Not even the smell of smoke. And think about your past experiences and things that were not good. I'm beginning to see them as shadows, like storms. Mr. Betty says evil is either
person, place, or thing.
Thank you. Person, place, or thing. So if you think some person is evil, had acted evilly towards you, caused all kinds of disruptions, see it not as person, as a shadow of animal magnetism, a thundercloud passing through. Don't give it the reality of a person or a place or a thing. It's just a passing shadow to come. Why? To teach you a lesson. If there was some so-called evil in your life, what lesson did you need to learn? It's usually you needed to love more, to stand up for truth, to find there's some lesson there. So see it that way. Do not see it as any person, place, or thing, just a passing shadow that the light dispels. And it will help you get rid of this belief of a past. God requires our past, the Bible says. So, and this will help you immeasurably in your health. Now, Linda, what did you write on the forum in citation 8 in Science and Health?
I wrote about the line where it says, if the scientist reaches his patient through divine love, the healing work will be accomplished at one visit. And I think about this a lot and have been waiting for it to be in the lesson again so I could speak to it. Because from my own personal experience and being here and having worked with a practitioner and have some healings very quick and some not, it's really clear it's my thought that's not being reached. It's not the work. And it made me think a lot about this because growing up under the Boston model, the whole idea was like this magic wand would come and these instant healings should take place. And I don't think there was ever any really sense of what the patient's job was, whether he needed to be reached. It was a very twisted sense of Mrs. Eddy's science. And I realized I have a deep job of being able to be reached.
Thank you. Yeah, again, I remember in class, Mrs. Eddy discussing this and asking what was the key word in that sentence. And the key word was?
Reaches.
Yes. It wasn't that, oh, in one visit, the disease will be gone.
Yeah.
That was not the key. The key was reaches. And many people, they like it to an onion with have all these layers that you have to peel. Or the story of the frozen river with the sun shining on the river, and it would freeze up again, and then the sun would shine, and it would freeze up again. Sometimes it takes a while for that sunshine to reach the person. And then that definition to extend, to stretch, to arrive at, to penetrate. And then the word penetrate, to enter or pierce, to make way into, to affect the mind, to cause to feel. So it took, many of my healings took a long time. Mrs. Evans would say it took a long time for you to get into that situation. It might take a while to get out of it. And in many ways, I was unreachable because I was told that. I was told I was hopeless at times. And I was like, well, thanks a lot. But it made me dig deeper and work harder. And I had all of these walls up, thick walls. So we all have to just relax, let those walls come down. Don't be afraid of the truth. Don't be afraid. The truth can only bless you. Let it penetrate in you. Let it all come out. Don't try to hide some dark secret you're so afraid of. There's no secret. God knows what it is. And so what? What of it? It was never the truth anyway. You're giving it reality by protecting it, defending it, cherishing it. There are many ways we can cherish an error.
Yeah, and there is no unforgivable sin. There is no unpardonable. There is no unhealable disease. So it's not like you have to be afraid of letting the walls down. What is it that would keep us from letting the walls down?
Pride.
Pride, pure and simple. And pride is never your friend. Pride is your worst enemy. So when you feel uncomfortable, when you feel like your pride is being hurt or challenged, well, that's a good thing. So let it happen. It'll only hurt for a second.
Right, just like pulling a Band-Aid off. And then the beautiful, what Florence spoke to, let unselfishness, goodness, mercy, justice, health, holiness, love, the kingdom of heaven reign within us. And sin, disease, and death will diminish until they finally disappear. Powerful statement. When we say a prayer to our children at night with that one, instead of thinking about your problem, what your problem is, think about how much unselfishness, goodness, mercy, justice, health, holiness, how much of that are you thinking about? How much of that are you cherishing? How much of that are you letting grow inside you? That's what we want to grow inside us. That is what we want to cherish. And then that is what we will externalize in our experience. Lawrence, did you want to say anything more to that one?
Well, it's a sin, disease, and death that we want to get rid of. So here we've been given what will get rid of it. So
That's it.
it's just beautifully simple and wonderful to just keep that in thought.
And also what you wrote about finding a sovereign antidote for error. And what did you say about that?
Wait 1 second. Yeah, I like the word sovereign because it commands something. It's supreme in power, possessing supreme dominion, a sovereign ruler of the universe. So it's not our, sometimes I think I get the question, oh, I can't make this happen, or I can't make this happen. We're talking about a sovereignty here, power, God's power, that, when it's present in our thinking, there is nothing to withstand it. So I just love that, to find a sovereign antidote for error in the life-giving power of truth acting on human belief. That just impressed me. That's what will open the doors for us and free us.
Thank you. And that's why Mrs. Eddy insists that we stand porter at the door of thought. Is this thought from God? Is it the sovereign thought? Or is it from somewhere else that does me no good?
We will end with Christian Healing by Mary Baker Eddy.
Christian Healing. History repeats itself. Tomorrow grows out of today. But heaven's favors are formidable. They are calls to higher duties, not discharge from care. And whoso builds on less than an immortal basis hath built on sand. We have asked in our selfishness to wait until the age advanced to a more practical and spiritual religion before arguing with the world the great subject of Christian healing. But our answer was, then there were no cross to take up and less need of publishing the good news. A classic writes, at 30, man suspects himself a fool, knows it at 40, and reforms his plan. At 50, chides his infamous delay, pushes his prudent purpose to resolve. Heaven's signet is love. We need it to stamp our religions and to spiritualize thought, motive, and endeavor. Tireless being, patient of man's procrastination, affords him fresh opportunities every hour. But if science makes a more spiritual demand, bidding man to go up higher, he is impatient, perhaps, or doubts the feasibility of the demand. But let us work more earnestly in his vineyard, and according to the model on the mount, bearing the cross meekly along the rugged way, into the wilderness, up the steep ascent, on to heaven, making our words golden rays in the sunlight of our deeds. And these signs shall follow them that believe. They shall lay hands on the sick, and they shall recover.
Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.